Good morning to you, my friends, wherever you may be in the world today. Alan Clements here from Maui, the occupied islands of Hawaii, learning more about that. Terrifying and fascinating. Welcome to Planet Clusterfuck, Labor Day, Anti-Misinformation Day, Holy Grail Day. Today's talk, something like that. Informed consent. Informed consent. And the new radical, I wanted to use the new activism. My body, my mind, my choice. Informed, spiritual, medical, psychological consent. The new, the new activism, the new radical. And then somehow, I don't know why I'm motivated to do this. It's almost tongue-in-cheek, kind of dark satire, to talk a little bit, explore a little bit of this so-called notion, this so-called idea, this ideal of an integrated spiritual life. And clearly, I'm not very qualified to speak about that, but I will attempt to play within my own humanness and folly to share the evidence of my horror. Do not follow me under any circumstance. To quote something from Life of Byron. Many of you know, I don't want to overly indulge me here again. Many of you know, though, that I have been, this last couple of weeks, compelled to write a will, and a living will, and a thing known as the 5 wishes, if in fact you are immobilized, unconscious, these are your wishes, aka an advanced medical directive, which of course must be notarized. It's essentially a document for those who may come, the medical professionals, emergency room, ambulances. It's so funny. Although I've been told before coming to Hawaii, and I've been told here on the island by the medical professionals, with my particular condition, don't even bother calling emergency. We cannot save you. We don't have the skill set to put a foot-long incision through your sternum and your chest and to repair an aneurysm of the ascending aorta. It just won't work. So just chill on that. Although an advance directive has to get notarized by the very doctor who tells me, don't call us to save your life. But you need my signature in order to die. Back to the original topic of informed consent. And I got this document, and the tyranny, I don't know why, of looking at all these elements of life while we're breathing, while I'm breathing, and figuring out when you're unconscious, and then of course then when you're dead, who should do what, when, and why, and how, for how long, and all the little minutiae of my life of the mind, which has really been kind of anti-belongings outside of this mass surveillance screen that I have called an iPhone. How to talk about when you can't talk and when you're dead, what should be done about your damn body and your few belongings, primarily owned by the digital cloud, Amazon, Audible, Apple, Google, What do you want to do with your emails, your hard drives, your videos, your live streams? And this informed consent, the dialogue right now, I'm not going to get into it right now, I'm going to save it for Monday or Tuesday. It's really captured, I don't know if this is the right, captured my imagination, my fascination, my disgust to explore, and it's not deep science to look into this stuff, the nature of the vaccinations. And I'm not anti-vax. It's just not part of the deal. I'm just more into data-driven research. I'm an investigative journalist with a little bit of a spiritual side to me. And so I'm looking into who are the pundits talking about this and that, listening to the information that's being put out into the mainstream, into the middle stream, into the basement stream, who's being censored and who's being canceled and why, under what reasons. And it's so simple. I mean, I'm wondering why I'm getting a doctor to give me my informed consent. Listen, when I am unconscious, if I'm unconscious in this room, if I just like pass over and I'm writhing in pain, and I'm unable to make choices on my own behalf, well, check out this advanced directive on my fridge and also on my desk, signed by my doc. Under no uncertain terms, stick a needle in my body. Okay, cool. Have you gotten the vax yet? It's the perversity of, I have the right not to be revived if I'm in a coma. No needles, no oxygen, no even putting me into the back of an ambulance or medevacing me to Stanford, 4 million miles away to save your life. But mandatory experimental mRNA, some kind of something, drug, pharmaceutical, big pharma, big money, big profit, big lie, anti-vaccine vaccine that is diminishing in its capacity to prevent you from death or serious illness. And listen, I'm not 120 years old. If I get the flu, if I get the COVID, okay, if you die, you die. But you're in that 0.001%. It's like, let's get very more specific than even in embryo today, that the woman must inject the fetus with Pfizer. Have you gotten the booster yet before you're even born? I mean, it's so Monty Python-esque, bad, dark, not even good Saturday Night Live on acid, dark satire. And we're talking about informed consent. No, you don't have informed consent, but you can die. No, but you must get a signature for it. But no, have you gotten the vaccine? And who's right, who's wrong? How effective are they? Israel doesn't even exist. That report is all bullshit. Fact check. By whom? By Fauci, by Biden. You don't know what in the hell to believe anymore, except disbelief is the new nibbana, the new nirvana, the new wisdom, the new freedom. Disbelief, not misinformation, trying to be, who's got the best form of inquiry and deep reasoning and independent thinking and all the questions of Elie Wiesel questioning the third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh Reich. No. Don't ask why. Just do what I tell you to do. Roll up your sleeves, shut the fuck up, get the vaccine. I mean, it's like, what are you dead? Look at all those videos that are going around with men and women who've lost friends and family and spouses who voluntarily took the vax, and the adverse effects being underreported and the deaths. And it's like, no, it's not 10,000, it's not 50, it's over 100,000. My God. People tell me, Alan, why don't you get operated on and save your life? I said, well, 6 out of 100 don't make it across the street when they get the surgery. Another 5 or 6 wish they were dead. Another 5 to 10 have brain fog for the next month, 2, 6, 7 years. There's a second chance of an aneurysm. There's another 3% to 10% of a third aneurysm, and you live on the table like kind of a, pork belly that's constantly being sliced and diced, or a kind of human sushi that never dies. It always gets eaten. And it's like, what am I thinking? Why am I doing this? Informed consent. No, I'm not afraid of disease. I'm not afraid of illness. I'm not afraid of death. But I am a lover of freedom of choice and sovereignty of mind and thought and psychology and the sanctity of my own biology. How uncool it would be to say, hey man, smoke this cigarette, it's good for you. That's what they wanted to let us know back in the 1920s and the 30s. Your happiness is contingent on this important toxic inhalation called the cigarette. Wow, I can find a beautiful husband, a beautiful wife, I'll have a lovely family, I'll make more money, I'll be able to buy fine clothes, I'll be more accepted in social circles only if I smoke. Until you see later on, they got that tracheectomy in there, and informed consent is called misinformation and propaganda. Next thing you know, they're spitting out through their throats just before they're dead. Both my aunts died of emphysema from smoking, even though they stopped at the age of 40, informed consent. And then propaganda. Okay, now, get a little bit more concrete here, Alan. I was trying to map out in my mind this morning in my meditation, like some of the discernible dimensions of my so-called desire to be a full human being, a more AKA integrated, spiritualized, psychologically awake, existentially nuanced, activist-oriented, yoga-defined, meditating, Western rebel, savant, independent thinker, integrated into my spiritual Western urban life with my what? My 2 cars and my BMW and my mindfulness routine when I drive, feeling the wheel beneath my hands, breathing in and out, noticing the red light is not green, pressing my foot on the brake, pressing, mindfulness when I'm driving. This is what an integrated spiritual life looks like, and give donations at the end of the retreat to make the teachers richer and richer in 6 figures and 7 figures, and never enough Dharma. And the pretense of this kind of what? Dharma kind of 1.0, integrated into the urban elite, Western, white, apartheid, spiritualized, perfect body world? No. So I was thinking about this, and I came up with 7 little dimensions, and if I can remember them. Pre-Burma, my life in LA, I would call it the jagged art of dislocation and the high harmony of rejection. And then when I went to Burma, my arrival there, shaving my head and donning the mahogany robes, and being immersed for the first time in a sanctuary called a meditation center, called a monastery, where the rule was simply to be mindful of that which was arising at any of the 6 sense doors, in the absence of something more predominant. At the doors, be aware when you're sitting of the breathing coming into the chest and the abdomen, rising. And when the breath leaves the body, notice the sensations of the body collapsing, falling. And then when you have a thought, thinking, or judging, or when you hear a sound, hearing, when you see something, seeing, when you move your arm, the routine of being in a monastery. And there was something very beautiful about that. I call that my self-responsibility 2.0 phase. It was very interesting to me that under no circumstance is there an appropriate judgment. In other words, everything that arises within the human psyche, your own mind, Alan, you must be mindful of that because you must control your own happiness or your own conflict. And that made such perfect sense to me. 100% self-responsibility. But is that the integrated spiritual life? No, that's a very important survival means to be in a monastery. I remember the first month of being in the monastery for me in Burma, and shaving my head, wearing the robes, walking one step at a time, sitting 8 1-hour sittings, 6 1-hour walkings, 2 meals a day. It was a beautiful experience, but everything in the monastery was a sense of contempt. The dogs, why do we have dogs barking like this? It could have been cars, it could have been buildings, it could have been bombs, but it was like, why? Just notice the hearing on your ear, notice your irritation, notice it. You can develop freedom this way. Dogs. Divine synchronicity. Call it the self-responsibility 2.0 phase. And it was very beautiful to reclaim righteous indignation, judgment, and blame. And to come home into myself. The best kept secret, I often would say, is my own being. And so meditation really helped me to do that. And then all of a sudden, midway through the second year or something, I became dreadfully ill with a variety of Asian illnesses. And I was unable to move. I was on an intravenous. I had to have an operation. And I was cared for now during this period of time by a group of strangers that were students of my teacher. And they were brought to the room where they came voluntarily and stayed in waves or sequences. And they chanted and they took me to answer the call of nature. They bathed me. They anointed me with their goodness. And I would call this phase of my desire to be an integrated spiritual being would be my understanding of what I would call sacred mutuality. You know, it was no longer just being aware of Alan's mind, being aware of Alan's thoughts, of me being mindful of my thoughts and my feelings and my various things. But now I had to really recognize that people were indispensable to my survival. And that sacred mutuality was a very powerful transition from individuality and radical self-responsibility into an elegant sense of having to understand spatial intimacy. I couldn't move, I couldn't talk very well, I couldn't navigate very well, and my life was completely in the hands of other. Sacred mutuality. And the fourth phase is when I was then, by the dictator, told to leave the monastery sometime after. And I was cast back into the world as a monk. And I went to Calcutta. And I would say that there was a type of vitality at this period of my life. And it was as if I was reborn. I was seeing the world through new eyes. There was a type of virginal magic, if you will, to be among the world. And all of a sudden, I began to see the mass of humanity. Those of you who've been to India, been to Calcutta especially, you cannot imagine how close people live together. You see people on the streets where you've been told they were born there, and they're unable to move because they're so handicapped by illnesses. And it's like, it's so shocking and confronting to see and to feel life at this level. It's so different than my life in LA, so different than my life in the monastery, so different than my life on that bed being healed by strangers, and the sacredness of that safety. And it was a powerful awakening to me to see, wow, how do you integrate your spiritual life into a circumstance like Calcutta? And I contracted this part of this contraction to extract myself. I didn't want to belong to society anymore, so I ran to an island monastery in the southern tip of Sri Lanka, where I stayed for nearly a year in deep isolation. I couldn't be around society. I couldn't be around many other people. The monks there were compelled to live in silence, no electricity and no running water. We were all fed by those villagers who came by boat to bring food to the monastery. And there was something in the safety and the sanctity of that level of silence and purity of just being in nature that was so amazing. But is that the integrated so-called spiritual life? Money, intimacy, sex, urbanization, cars, climate change, wars, vaccinations, the challenges. And then the next phase, after I went back to the West and disrobed, and I found myself, wow, a virgin in the Western culture that I rejected so viciously, all the things that I disliked about the West. And I created retreats in order to anesthetize myself from the jagged edge of what I once felt dislocated by and rejected by. The idea of integrating into Western society was so anathema to me, even more so today, oddly. So the idea of an integrated spiritual life, whatever that may mean, may be an ideal, may be an oddity, it may be something so different than what we hope to achieve. And so listening to this deeper instinct of freedom, this deeper heartbeat of the soul, what's right, what's really true here. And so I went back into the jungles of Burma out of a response to my Burmese ethnic families in the country. And I experienced up close for the first time human rights violations. And eventually I was in Yugoslavia briefly for a period of time during the war, in Croatia, then eventually in Bosnia. And to begin to see and to smell and to feel what human beings do to one another in the name of ideology, in the name of freedom, in the name of religion. And the idea of what does it mean to have an integrated spiritual life in the context of someone under siege in Sarajevo, a displaced person on the streets of Zagreb in Croatia, a woman who had been gang raped by Serbian soldiers. What does it mean to integrate your Catholicism, your Islam, your Allah, your Buddha, your mindfulness into a rape theater? And it obliterated my identity. It obliterated my capacity to understand. And I went down to my sacred knees again. I was humbled by the terror and the darkness of existence. If you know what I mean, I call it my apocalypse now phase, my sacred terror theater. And seeing eventually, when I went back to Burma with Aung San Suu Kyi, when she was released from 6 years of house arrest, that was totalitarianism up close. I had never known the privilege of wanting to integrate spirituality into a Western context until I was taken yet again out of that Western context and brought back in out of choice to a totalitarian regime, Burma. And to see these people, these courageous men and women, many of them I knew as nuns and monks, living through what I called the phase of their Dharma. I would call it, for me, the power of the human heart, the power of human conscience, the power of human dignity, and the power of human voice as an expression of an integrated spiritual life. God, I can never, ever shake, nor do I ever want to shake the lessons that continually flood through my fibers and my heart and my lungs and my blood. Those courageous men and women in Burma, many of them right now, Aung San Suu Kyi, incarcerated in a secret, strange, unknown location by the evil dictator Ming Online in that country, a country where there's a genocide of democracy. What does it mean to integrate spiritually? What does it mean to use your sacred terror and the contraction of your soul, as Aung San Suu Kyi and all the leaders of the country said, that the real revolution is in courage. That's what an integrated spiritual life looks like, is the courage to care for things larger than your own narcissism, your own self-interest. Another phase of my learning, from the jagged art of dislocation and the high harmony of rejection in LA back in the 70s, to my arrival in Burma in the monastery and learning self-responsibility 2.0, to the period of time when I was sick and unable to take care of myself, to see the elegant magic of sacred mutuality. And then eventually being thrown out by the dictator, going to Calcutta and eventually to Sri Lanka, seeing with new eyes for the first time, at the same time coming to a deeper truth, what's really true for me in this world. And I had to retreat from all forms of urbanization, all forms of human contact. I needed silence in a jungle to hear what I couldn't hear. Trust, 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 trust. And eventually I was led back based on some instinct to give back to the people of Burma. I found myself in an apocalyptic jungle. A book came out of that period called Burma, the Next Killing Fields. I became a kind of de facto sort of trans scholar of genocide and went to Bosnia and to Croatia, and I began to look into the machinations of evil and rape and persecution in the name of Allah, in the name of Greek Orthodox Catholicism, in the name of Christ, in the name of my own atheism, in the name, fill in the blank. Human beings can do evil if you fill in the blank and have a toxic relationship to it, and you give up. You give up independent thinking, informed consent. And that terror led me to the return to Burma to be with Daw Aung San Suu Kyi and U Tin Oo and U Chi Mung and U Win Tain and U Wei Win and all the other brothers and sisters and savants of radical activism at that time. And I learned right up close, and I had an American passport. I was always able to leave by and large, but it was totalitarianism up close. And what does that mean to me? The opposite of informed consent. Do as I say. The psychology of obedience. Obedience. Who would ever know at this point in life I'd be drawing upon totalitarian psychology? Obedience versus choice. Medical tyranny, political tyranny, all the ways in which we tyrannize people through a denial of our own evil toxicity. In the name of, we smile, we wear suits, we anoint, we even practice mindfulness, and we're unaware of the sociopathy of our own denied totalitarianism. And today we're seeing it more and more and more and more, because at the end of my time in Burma, I began to see those activists. Moving into the last couple of minutes of this talk, it's one thing to point out the faults of others, but to offer solutions is often a political or a diplomatic agenda. For me, I'm not a politician, I'm not a diplomat. I'm a bit of a, spoken word rebel with a high regard for my own dignity, my own conscience, the power of transformational choices and sovereignty, a love of freedom, of dance, of intimacy, of voice, of thought, the ability to create and to dream and adventure in this great strange soup called existence. But eventually the power of the human voice, that's what I learned in Burma. Creative activism, using the power of your conscience and your dignity and your creative elements within consciousness, using your hands, using your body, using your voice through theater, art, poetry, dance, acting, movie making, body undulating creations of unwillingness to be in obedience to totalitarian fear, the pornography of misinformation, as it's been said today as a cliche, the pandemic of misinformation being so radically misused, and the coercion and the corruption of our understanding of freedom that's led me to the final element of my so-called need to integrate into this great weird world called life, is there's nowhere to go now. There's no escape. It's hard to travel. And either we cower or we're all in. And this comes to the last point for me, to be all in as much as possible. And I encourage you to consider, what does it mean to go beyond the comfort of your own comforts and to consider ways to further engage the all-in integration of our religion, our philosophies, our ethics, our moral integrity, our spirituality, our physicality, our politics, our global democracy. Are you willing to go all in for the future of the children? That's the question I'm asking myself right now more and more as I rise into informed consent. I will soon have all which I'm supposed to do. A will, a living will, my 5 wishes, an advance directive. And I am going more and more into the creative expression of a radical disregard for being liked or accepted or applauded. And within that, what is true that I feel that I can create with colleagues and others who want to join the party, the revolution, and bring forth on the stage of the world, in the littlest or the most way possible, transformational theatrics, poems, a sound, waves and particles in a film, spoken, cinematic, colorful energies with music that serve identically, if not more powerfully, than when I was 16, when I first did my first hit of LSD. And it totally challenged my self-identity, my perceptions of myself, but at the same time, it confirmed something so beautiful at an existential core level. You can trust yourself. You have been right. You did not belong in the way in which conditioning and politics and a lot of what was being told by parents and teachers and politicians. They did their best, okay, give them that credit. But the molecule, the Dharma molecule, the spirit molecule, the DMT molecule, the MDMA molecule, the sex molecule, the God molecule, the Christ molecule, the Buddha molecule, call it what you want, the soul molecule, the pre-DNA, the trust in something called you, whatever you call integrating you as spiritual being in this, the world. What does it mean? To unleash with the power of your conscience, your dignity, your voice, call it creative existential rebellion. The unwillingness to participate in tyranny, totalitarianism, dictatorship, misinformation, and lies. And this comes at the very end. We must be armed today if we want to integrate into the world, into our spiritual life in a more full way. We must be armed to the teeth with special powers. It's not enough just to be fucking mindful of a thought, a feeling, an emotion, our money, our loot, whatever it may be. We need to be radically intelligent. Our intelligence must be fortified with a kind of deeper, post-psychedelic, revolutionary care for the future of life that we're so willing to lose our comfort zone, our homes, our privacy, our money, even our health, even let us die in the name of, right? Let's get rad, let's get real. The future of life, our children are at stake. The future of the planet's at stake. What's the point of living in a prison camp when we can use our voice, use our conscience, use our hands while we have them? It means being unhinged, unglued, unbalanced, learning bullshit detector. No, I don't think I want to participate in the sleeve role. Mandating is not cool. Selected use of the vaccination to the ultimate compromised human beings and give it to others around the world and champion in this time a revolution of therapeutics and health and meditation and intimacy and light. We've got a sun, an endless D3 source. We could have a revolution of extracts and supplements and massage and walks and health. The whole world could unmask and give over to nature, to give over to a revolution of freedom to anoint life within nature. At the same time, the big boys in the power places of politics and in Wall Street and the Great Reset dudes and dudesses in Davos and Silicon Valley, all who want to cancel the voice for their perverse need for profit and money, want to put us into a digital grave, into a physical grave. They want us to write our own advance directive. Under no circumstance revive yourself from the hypnosis of your own stupid obedience to totalitarianism. Giving away choice. The opposite is the wild fascination with the adventure of creative activism. The integrated life today is yet to be known. There is no working model that we have seen or known that I can understand. Yes, you could read some of the great books in people who've survived the gulags in Russia and the Soviet Union and Burma. The incredible courage of the civil rights leaders of King and so many others. Think of the life in India with Gandhi and the removal of an imperialistic, supremacist, God-like genocidal psychology called, whatever so-called Western civilization went, it just did so as a wave of genocide and imperialistic oppression. That's the trauma history wave of our ancestors and our background. And right now, who the hell wants to integrate into any of that? There's another wave coming, and right now, the calling, informed consent, that's a call to revolution. We've been ignited by an unrecognized mandate, which is essentially a call to revolution. Informed consent right now is a call to revolution. It's a call to voice freedom in any way, shape, and form. And as I close today, may I encourage you to encourage me. Should I lose my voice? Should I forget the power of creative activism? Let us remember, we're alive. It's a gift. It's a strange show. And within it, as long as we've got the cognitive functions, the physical, financial strength and wherewithal, we have power. We have the power to change ourselves, the power to support our family and our community and our nation and the future of freedom. And may I encourage you to use the power of your revolutionary freedom and do nothing without your consent. Be informed and understand misinformation. At the same time, vitalize and create incredible power to use your voice, to use your hands, to use every fiber of your mind to support the freedom and the liberation of freedom for the future of life on our precious planet. We have to thank our brothers and sisters, our mothers and fathers, all the guardians of freedom throughout history. Many of them, we have no idea who they were. The little acts of courage, the littlest of acts of ethical wisdom, the littlest, smallest acts. I remember U Win Tin, the great lion of freedom who spent 20 years plus in solitary confinement in a prison in Burma. I interviewed that man 5 times for 2 hours each. He gave away everything, his books, his contracts, his copyrights, to live in a small, open-air little hut, and gave everything to the families of political prisoners who weren't released from the gulags of Burma to help support them. You ask a man like that, how do you keep freedom alive 20 years in solitary? In-breath, out-breath. Riding the edge, is it, of the dignity of your rootedness in human rights, in the sanctity of choice, in informed consent, as a radical expression of your unwillingness to participate in tyranny and totalitarianism. I remember him telling me how he chipped pieces of brick off the wall of his prison cell and would grind those little pieces into chalk and put water in them, and just at the right texture, taking ever so long in Burmese, writing freedom on his prison cell wall. An integrated spiritual life. What will it be? So from my heart to yours, thank you for tuning in. Have a beautiful day. And God willing, hope to see you tomorrow. Thank you.